Bravelands, Broken Pride. Written by Erin Hunter. Prologue. The dazzling plains seemed to stretch forever. Even Windrider, a vulture soaring high above the savannah, struggled to see where Bravelands reached its end. Narrowing her ancient eyes, she let her gaze trail over the great yellow grass sea and pinpointed at last where it met the endless blue sky in a shimmering line of light. A wingtip twitched, and she banked, riding the warm air downward in a broad, graceful spiral. Her flock followed her lead, calling out to one another in harsh, guttural voices. But Windrider was silent, scanning the savannah. Far below, herds of animals as small as ants moved across the land, following the paths beaten by countless generations. A gash in the land marked the muddy, trickling river. A horde of wildebeests was teeming into the gully and galloping up and over the sheer bank. Zebras and gazelles, grazing together on the far side, glanced up incuriously at the wildebeest's approach. Then they dipped their heads to graze again, ambling and milling peacefully. A dark spot on the landscape caught Windrider's keen eye, a creature separate from the others, and not moving. She flew lower, adjusting her path with great beats of her broad wings. "There, my flock, there." The others followed her down in swooping circles. "May Windrider's eyes be forever sharp," cried Blackwing, as the others took up the chorus of gratitude. "She has found us flesh once again." It was just as Windrider had hoped, the corpse of a gazelle. Its old and tired spirit had gone. Its eyes were blank and dead. Perhaps a cheetah had brought it down. It lay half hidden between ochre rocks, barely visible to the wingless rot-eaters. And, though its killer had fed, much of its torn flesh remained on its bones. The gazelle had enjoyed its time and its life. Now it would nourish the vultures, just as they, in their turn, would one day become food for others. All was as it should be, or at least as Windrider hoped. "We must test the flesh, brothers and sisters," she called. "Then we can feed in peace." Windrider tilted her head, banking sharply to the land, the other vultures flapping and clamoring behind her. Her claws touched the gritty ground, and she hopped a couple of paces toward the gazelle. With a glance to the birds on her right and left, Windrider nodded once. "A bad death will linger with the fallen." "May the Great Spirit always grant good death," chorused the rest of the flock. Each vulture tore a thin strip of meat from the carcass's flank, gulping it down. They all paused, looking to Windrider for the final judgment. She closed her eyes briefly. "The kill is clean," she reassured them at last. "Feed my flock." When the carcass was picked bare, its bones stripped of the last tattered remnants of flesh, Windrider stepped back. Beating her wings, she launched herself skyward once more. Every vulture, sated, followed her in a chaos of feathers and rasping cries. It felt good to return to the air, to soar higher and higher into the fierce blue, knowing that the flock had eaten well and survived for another day. When she was high enough to catch a broad current of warm air, Windrider let it take her, twitching her wings, gazing down once more. From the shimmering horizon to the dark, sprawling forests, to the low range of mountains far beyond the plains, she surveyed the land. Ahead lay a cluster of slender, flat-topped acacia trees. At their edge, just within their shade, shifting golden yellow shapes were visible against the dry earth. Lions, she thought, lounging in the heat of the day. "They will not hunt for now," remarked Blackwing, folding her gaze. "Not until dusk," Windrider agreed. "Then they will feast, and we will follow." Windrider had mixed feelings about the great prides of Bravelands. Lions meant food, unsullied and copious. Like all the creatures of the land, they followed the code, killing only to survive. But she loathed their arrogance. They were among the few creatures who would not follow the Great Mother, leader of all the animals, and give respect to her wisdom. 2 cubs were romping and play-fighting, full of energy and mischief, even in the heat of the high white sun. As her shadow passed over the smaller of the 2, he started and looked up. His golden eyes met hers, and he opened his small jaws. She was still high above him, but the sound of a roar buffeted the air around her. With astonishment, Windrider felt her wings tremble, and she was momentarily rocked off her course. "Windrider?" came Blackwing's concerned voice. Glancing back, Windrider realized none of her flock had felt the impact of that roar. No, it was not the lion's voice. "That's not possible." "It is nothing," she told Blackwing curtly. Half angry, half fascinated, she forced her wings to readjust, balancing her flight once more. No groans lion's roar could reach the heights of the sky, let alone a tiny cub's. There is more here to know. Windrider tilted in the air, seeking out the little lion once again. He still stood there, stiff-legged and defiant, his golden gaze fixed upward. At last, his tail whisking in triumph, he turned away. The other cub followed him as he bounded back to his pride. Lost in thought, Windrider veered east. What she had seen, it was an omen, she was sure of it, though she could not imagine what its message might be. A tiny cub with a roar to make the sky shudder. This is a vision, a portent. She led her flock higher and farther into the clear blue sky, until the small pride of lions and even the huge herds of the savannah were lost in the beautiful vastness of Bravelands. End of prologue.